Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today I wanted to share my thoughts on the new Commander bracket system beta that was just presented to the community by Wizards of the Coast. But before we get into the details of the new bracket system, let's quickly recap what the underlying problem of Commander was or is and why this new system is being developed right now. Commander was designed as a highly casual format that tried to get away from traditional competitive formats and a competitive mindset. However, over time, the community took this new format and made it fit their personal preferences. Some people play highly casual, some people stick to precon, and others, like myself, decided to disregard the initial concept of a casual format and push Commander to its power level limits. This development led to some issues within the community as it became increasingly hard for people to play pickup games with random players at events and LGSs because people struggled with finding decks that functioned at a similar power level as their own and with a similar gameplay philosophy. Anyone who played casual against random players has had this experience of being pub-stomped and being frustrated because of glaring power level differences. This is mostly because power levels exist on a fluid spectrum without hard borders, and because the commonly used power level scale had no reliable guidelines, which led to almost everyone calling their deck a 7. For the longest time, the Commander Rules Committee's solution for this and the lackluster banned list was to refer back to pre-game table talks and the Rule Zero approach. But this concept did not hold up over time, and especially outside of established frequent playgroups, it almost always failed. The fallback to pre-game table talks and Rule Zero increasingly became a farce because it felt like a comfortable solution for the RC to not manage the format and to disregard the needs of competitive players. In fact, the competitive scene was treated very poorly, despite having established itself for years now and being the fastest growing competitive MTG format. The competitive players and their needs were often disregarded, and bans were almost never made to help improve the competitive meta. While, from the point of view of the competitive scene, mostly unproblematic cards were banned, such as Jeweled Lotus, more problematic cards, such as Heuristic Study, are still legal. Finally, when the Rules Committee decided to ban Dockside, Naru, Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt, the uproar in the community and the backlash for the RC came to a tipping point. The cEDH meta was turned upside down, and the cEDH community made real efforts to establish their own ban list, even accepting that this could eventually fragment the format. At the same time, a lot of players from all parts of the Commander community became so dissatisfied with the RC's management of the format and the bans that some felt the need to directly threaten the RC members, which of course is absolutely unacceptable, but subsequently led to the RC throwing the towel and handing over the responsibilities of managing the format to Wizards of the Coast. This was now almost 6 months ago, and the game developers over at Wizards took the time to come up with a concept to solve some of the issues the Commander community voiced in the past. Players from different facets of the community were asking for the following things. There have to be clear guidelines to reliably assess the power level of a deck. There need to be soft rules and recommendations to support pre-game table talk and make the concept of Rule Zero more valid. The Commander banned list needs to consider competitive play while not ignoring the needs for a fun casual gameplay experience. And ideally, all facets of the format should be managed without fragmenting it into multiple sub-formats. So what did Wizards propose in yesterday's stream? As announced a few weeks ago, a new bracket system, or at least the beta version of a new bracket system, was presented to the community. This system categorizes decks into the following brackets. Bracket 1, Exhibition. These decks are ultra casual, can play no cards from the so-called Game Changers list, more on that later, and cannot play mass land denial, extra turn spells, 2-card combos, and only play a few tutors. Number 2, Core. These decks are close to the average precon commander deck. They too can play no cards from the Game Changer list, cannot play mass land denial, cannot chain extra turn spells, cannot play 2-card combos, and only play a few tutors. Number 3, Upgraded. These decks push beyond the level of precon decks. They can play 3 cards from the Game Changers list, cannot play mass land denial, cannot chain extra turn spells, can only play late game 2-card combos, but as many tutors as they like. Number 4, Optimized. These decks push commanders and themes to their limits. There are no restrictions on what an optimized deck can play other than the banned list. And number 5, cEDH. These decks are built to be played competitively and tuned towards a specific metagame. There are no restrictions on what a cEDH deck can play other than the banned list. The Game Changers list that the bracket system refers to is a supplementary list that exists in addition to the banned list and consists of cards that are not banned, but are considered to be so impactful for the gameplay experience that their use is limited depending on which bracket you aim to brew your deck for. This concept isn't new and most likely based on the point system that is already established in other formats such as Canadian Highlander. On top of this beta bracket system, Wizards also announced that there will be some unbannings for Commander in the near future, but it's not yet clear which cards they are considering for that. Anyway, the most important question we should be asking right now is, what does and doesn't this new system solve? The new bracket system provides a much clearer and much more reliable framework to assess the power level of different decks. While it's definitely not perfect, we need to keep in mind that the current proposal is still in the beta stage. With the new bracket system, you can build a deck and clearly communicate to your opponents what power level you build it for. However, herein also lies a substantial pitfall that Wizards has not yet addressed sufficiently. The power level of a deck cannot be solely determined by the cards that are being played in it. By setting up a very clear framework based on specific cards, it allows a certain group of players to push the power level of their deck to the absolute limits of a certain bracket. So power levels within a bracket will still be on a fluid spectrum, and there will be decks that fit into the framework of a certain bracket while also pub stomping most other decks in that bracket. As is usually the case, some players will find ways to break every single bracket. This is something that will always be the case no matter the system you establish, but I think there is definitely some room for improvement here. Also, I don't think referring to bracket 5 as cedh or competitive EDH is ideal. While the term is already established, the new bracket system allows for competitive brews within different brackets. There could be a competitive bracket 3 deck or tournament, as well as competitive bracket 4 or 5 decks and tournaments. The competitiveness is based on an underlying approach and mindset, and defined by the environment or meta within a certain bracket, not solely by the cards played in the deck. Personally, I think this is really cool because it opens up endless possibilities for brews and different metas and tournaments for each bracket. So I'd personally recommend not referring to bracket 5 as competitive, because all brackets can be played competitively, but I'd prefer calling it the open bracket, just like open categories in different sports. So how can we further improve this new system to accommodate the needs of the community as a whole? Obviously, the Game Changers list has to be revised over time. I like that it takes into consideration cards that have an impact on different brackets, such as Rhystic Study and Tergrid or Glacial Chasm, but it's definitely not yet finished and there are a lot of broken cards missing from it. At the same time, the actual banned list has to be shaven down significantly and be based mostly, not solely, on the needs of the tournament-specific Commander meta, while not completely ignoring the needs of a healthy casual Commander game. In order to do that, I propose that the bracket system needs to add and prioritize a philosophical framework of expectations for pods and games, so that the brackets don't solely rely on the cards that are allowed or not allowed. This framework could look something like this. As you can see, there are still 5 brackets: Exhibition, Precon, Upgraded, Optimized and Open. Each bracket has its own gameplay philosophy. Each bracket has its own limit of game changers that can be played in the deck. And each bracket has their own recommendations. Additionally, I added a little footnote that says if winning is prioritized for a deck, it is recommended to move up at least 1 bracket for a casual gameplay experience so that you don't pub stomp your opponents within a certain bracket. So with this improved framework, you would assess the power level of your deck by prioritizing the gameplay philosophy. How did you brew the deck and how do you intend to play the deck? Once that's established, you can look at the amount of game changers you play and of course the specific recommendations of cards and effects that should not be included in certain brackets. This concept, although slightly more complex, would support pre-game table talk and improve the quality of games because it helps you find fitting pods and clearly pinpoint discrepancies between gameplay philosophy, the amount of game changers, and recommendations, which subsequently gives you a starting point for the eventual Rule 0 discussion. Finally, there needs to be a much clearer separation between bracket 4 and 5, because as it is right now, the only real difference we can see is the reference to a metagame mindset, which, as mentioned before, can be the case for decks in all brackets. It would be much better to use a more tangible point of reference, such as the amount of game changers in the deck, in addition to its underlying philosophy and approach to distinguish between the optimized and the open bracket. So let's wrap this up. In my opinion, the new system is a bold but very necessary step in the right direction. It is definitely not perfect, especially the game changers list and the loosely defined differences between bracket 4 and bracket 5, but the point system already works well in other formats like CanLander and is definitely a promising approach to manage the format without completely fragmenting it. I don't think the format will break into multiple subformats just because of the game changer list and the recommendations. In fact, I think the framework will help casual play to be more fun and competitive play to be more functional. And most importantly, even if I disagree with the bracket name, I appreciate that cedh is finally recognized as a core part of the Commander format, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this all plays out in 2025. And that's it. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with me or disagree? And please explain your reasoning. As always, thanks for watching my videos. This is Eisenherz and auf Wiedersehen.